over there.
Order. 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 I call the Honourable Member Maggie Barry.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I rise to speak with pleasure to the Waitaki District Council reserves and other land empowerment bill.
Point of order, the Honourable Member Phil Twyford.
Mr Speaker, I just want to inquire, in fact, whether the member has visited Forrester Heights, because there's a standing order called the Maggie Barry principle.
No. The member's being facetious. That's a debatable point, quite frankly. I call the Honourable Member Maggie Barry. I've dealt with the issue. Point of order. Honourable Jonathan Coleman.
No, I'd just like to note, Mr Speaker, there's just a continuing pattern of the point of order process being abused in this House, and that's a very good example.
The member will be seated. I have dealt with the issue. This is a robust Parliament. There is always some leeway, and it's up to the Speaker to judge the situation. I call the Honourable Member Maggie Barry.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Oh, point of order. I'm sorry. Holly Walker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I just have a query regarding the speaking order. I believe the next speaker on the list should be my colleague from the Green Party, Eugenie Sage.
Actually, to be quite truthful, you're absolutely right. But I'm now in the awkward position that once I've called someone, I have to accept the call, and I did not see the member. My apologies, but unfortunately I've called Maggie Barry and she has to take the call. I call the Honourable Member Maggie Barry.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Let the record stand true. Maggie Barry stands to speak to the second reading after a couple of false starts and mischievous ones at that. Nothing uncommon there, though, particularly from the member who's come a long way from Devonport to Te Atatu, and apparently he's flip-flopped on his holidays down to Oamaru. How commendable. My family landed in Oamaru back in the 1860s. It is an area we know particularly well, and I am very happy to speak to this bill because I commend Jackie Dean as a local member for finally getting this up and running. There have been a number of submissions around this over a number of years. We heard the recently shockingly aged David Parker, such as the leadership toll it's taken on him. He has certainly aged in front of our very eyes, has he not? But it languished under Labor for 3 years. There were submissions called for at that time, which never got anywhere. And without the energy of Jackie Dean, who had to put up with a lot of silly conspiracy theories, which the Honourable Annette King said she did not share, but still wanted to talk about again today. There have been a lot of mischievous comments made around this, and I noted that Barry Monks has been talked about a lot. He was a submitter who came up with some arcane and, as it turned out, totally unfounded and incorrect information, which held the committee's deliberations up for some period of time because it was wrong, completely wrong, and that was the advice that we had. Interestingly, though, Barry Monks has a long association with the area as the Labor Party candidate, failed Labor Party candidate for the area. Jackie Deans holds the seat. I wonder why so many Labor Party people went down there to have a look. But let's put that to one side. We'll give them the benefit of the doubt. It's not something they usually do with us, but we have a lot more largesse than that. And I would like to talk about the issue at hand, which is the putting right of something that is actually not something that we should be dwelling on for this length of time in Parliament. The status of the land needed to be defined. This bill did that. There were mistakes made by councils dating back a very, very long way. Section 13 of the Public Reserves Act, Amendment Act in 1862, provided that whenever any land was set apart from the Governor as a public reserve and by publication in the Gazette has been declared to have been set aside as a reserve, that land is not to be alienated by way of sale, mortgage, lease or otherwise. There's no argument about that, but it is about how this land is described. So the evidence that Lookout Point has been set apart as a public reserve under that Amendment Act, there is no evidence to support it. So we discussed all of this at length. And when you go back through the files, and I guess the Oamaru district in those days were commendable in that they tried to keep as many records as they could. They were very careful about what they did with their paperwork, but it did slip through, and this was a mistake. But when they searched through what was there, they were able to go through a very large paper trail indeed. And I think a lot of our submitters are to be congratulated because they spend a lot of time and a lot of effort going back through the history, going back through through the paperwork and trying to determine what in fact is the status of this much sought after and locally very important piece of land. I do know Oamaru very well. I have been there many times in many incarnations, as it were. Their Botanic Gardens is amongst the oldest in the country, and a very fine one it is too, and visible from Forrester Heights Lookout Point. And for those members of the Labour Party who didn't go on the Tiki tour down there, we were given the pictures and we have had a look at it. And to refresh our memories, this is a prime piece of land that also looks out over the Blue Penguin colony. And what some members may not know, but such was the exhaustive nature of some of the submissions that we all know it now, that it is a remarkable piece of avifaunus, rich fossil reserves. This is of dead bird fossils, very rare in the South Island. Bird bones, especially the moa, recorded findings in the limestone which have been preserved and make it unique. So there are very many reasons why a lookout of this kind will be preserved and needs to be properly understood and what its status is so that it will be preserved in perpetuity. We heard from the Mayor, Alec Familton, and the CEO, Mike Ross, as well, that when this is finally resolved and goes through, as I'm sure it will, the Select Committee deliberations and then again back here into the House for its third reading, once that has occurred, they have undertaken to go back to the people of Oamaru and to ask them what it is that they would like. And I think that Forrester Heights and Lookout Point will be enshrined as a reserve and keep that status. And as Jackie Dean has pointed out, she has been there many times walking. It is a favoured place in Oamaru to look out over the harbour and look out over what is an extremely attractive historic town. So there are a couple of issues that the Council wanted resolved. They work closely, incidentally, with Ngāi Tahu. And Ngāi Tahu had also done a great deal of research on this matter and had found out that there was, in fact, no problem around the Council's view, which is that the Waitaki District Council has a right to the freehold title to the land, and it is therefore not subject to Ngāi Tahu Claims Settlement Act in 1998. This was something that was raised by a number of submitters. It is a legitimate concern, or it was felt to be. Once again, it was explored in detail. And if anyone ever wondered about the, I suppose, the robust nature and the rigorous nature of what goes on in Select Committee, this really is a case in point, this Members' Bill, because the level of detail that the submitters chose to come forward with, which then put the very hard-working officials, sent them back to the books and sent them back to the drawing board to double-check everything. I can assure you that the findings that we have come out with now are very much the accurate ones. I guess hopefully when this matter was discussed in the Reserves and Other Lands Disposal Bill Select Committee, that was back in 2009, there was, I think, 37 written submissions there and there were a further 19 heard. That was that committee. That was all, though, put to one side. And the committee that I sat on as the Local Government and Environment Select Committee, we considered 27 submissions and they were very detailed as well. I've handed some on to my colleagues, but Paul Goldsmith, who's chatting happily here, could perhaps hand them to me. La 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 la, Paul, handing over the submissions. There we go, to hand them over. Thank you, very good. Paying close attention to his colleagues. But there's a big stack of them. Suffice it to say, 27 submissions from interested parties, and we heard 7 of them. And the detail was enormous. See, the kilos and kilos of material. There's some around there as well, because for the other interested members of our party, they've also been looking at these. And yes, it is a visual part of the speech. I have the photographs, in fact, if the honourable member would like to see them. And we could easily do that thing, because this is a bill that we know far more about than we would have ever imagined possible, actually. Now, Land Information New Zealand has also taken a pivotal role in all this, and the Department of Conservation. They have looked at it exhaustively. They too are satisfied that treating Lookout Point land as a reserve was indeed a genuine mistake back in the day. Their assessment of it, and it is one that I agree with, is that it resulted, this mistake, from the various meanings and legal uses of the word reserve. And I guess with a country as young as New Zealand, sometimes the semantics have tripped us up where we haven't had the traditional examinations at a local level. But these have in fact been corrected now. So while we very much appreciate the sentiment of the submitters and acknowledge that there is a contention in this issue, after receiving advice from the Land Information New Zealand and the Department of Conservation, the belief very much of us on this side of the House and in the committee is that we believe the land was actually classified as reserves for an endowment of in aid of borrowed funds rather than as a recreation or similar reserve. The Otago Daily Times, not surprisingly, a very active local paper, has also taken a huge interest in this issue and has followed it. And again, as somebody who's relatively new to this House, I commend the local media on taking notice and paying close attention to the detailed workings of cases that are reflected from their local community in the House. And the Forester Heights status is likely to change was something that they predicted earlier in this year, and they are very much in favour of it as well, as a number of the people who have written in and given letter contributions to the Otago Daily Times. The Waitaki Concerned Citizens and Ratepayers Association chair said that while he was disappointed in the decision, because he was concerned the land could be split up into residential developments, was something that was echoed by some of the submitters, and I think it is in that fear that had motivated many people to come forward to our select committee, because they were worried that if the status changed, then there would be other less welcome changes that would be occurring, other than just tidying up the wording and the paperwork and the semantics of it. But as I said, when we had the Mayor who came to the select committee, he reassured us repeatedly he would be checking with the people, and it was an opportunity really to re-engage with the community on the use of land that was very dear to their hearts and the hearts of the community. So it is with pleasure that I speak to the second reading. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I commend this bill to the House.
I call the honourable member Eugenie